I found myself positioned behind a structural column at my sibling's nuptial ceremony. Nobody acknowledged my familial connection. Then an unfamiliar man took the seat next to mine and stated, "Simply follow my guidance and act as though you're accompanying me." When he rose to address the gathering, all attention shifted and my sibling's expression changed. However, I'm rushing through the narrative. Allow me to begin from the initial point. From the instant I obtained that ivory-toned invitation through the postal service 3 months prior. The correspondence reached me on a Tuesday dawn in April. I was residing in Denver at that time, employed as a confectionery artisan at a specialized bakery in the metropolitan area. My living quarters were compact yet comfortable, permeated with the aroma of vanilla essence and cinnamon from my trial baking endeavors. I had risen since 4 that dawn, refining a novel formula for honey lavender croissants. Therefore, when I ultimately returned home around 2 in the afternoon, I nearly overlooked the refined correspondence wedged among invoices and supermarket advertisements. Victoria was entering matrimony, my elder sibling, the favored offspring, the child who could commit no error in our maternal parents' perspective. The invitation was ceremonial, conventional, precisely what I anticipated from her. Ivory-embellished lettering proclaimed her union to an individual named Gregory, a designation I had never heard her reference during our progressively infrequent telephone exchanges. I ought to have felt pleased for her. Siblings are expected to feel pleased for one another during significant occasions. However, as I grasped that invitation, all I could contemplate was the previous family meal we had participated in together 6 months prior. Our maternal parent had organized Thanksgiving at her residence in the residential areas. I had transported a pumpkin confection I had dedicated 2 days, perfecting strata of seasoned cream cheese and ginger cookie foundation that had resulted beautifully. Victoria had transported commercially purchased pastry. "Elizabeth, you genuinely should not have exerted such effort," my maternal parent stated, scarcely observing my confection before positioning it on the distant corner of the serving surface. "Victoria's pastry appears delightful, so traditional and conventional." That was the pattern always. Victoria could appear without contributions and obtain commendation for her attendance alone. I could transport the celestial body on a metallic platter, and it would somehow be excessive, too ostentatious, too tempting excessively. The nuptial invitation incorporated a diminutive correspondence card handwritten in Victoria's flawless penmanship. "Elizabeth, I acknowledge we have not been as connected recently, but it would signify everything to have your attendance. You are my sole sibling. I contacted her that night." She responded on the 4th signal, sounding preoccupied. "Victoria, I obtained your invitation. Felicitations?" "Oh, favorable. I was concerned it might become misplaced in the postal system. Can you attend?" "Naturally. I would not absent myself. Inform me about Gregory. How did you two encounter?" There was an interval just extended enough to make me question. "At a medicinal conference. He occupies a territorial director position at Bennett Health Solutions. Extremely accomplished, extremely established. Maternal parent absolutely cherishes him." Naturally, she did. I questioned if Victoria loved him or if she loved his appearance on documentation. "I am genuinely pleased for you," I stated, attempting to intend it. "Appreciation. Listen, I must depart. We are assembling with the nuptial coordinator in 20 minutes. I will transmit you additional particulars subsequently." She disconnected before I could state farewell. I observed my telephone at the sudden conclusion to our exchange and experienced something recognizable settle in my torso. It was not precisely melancholy, was not precisely anger. It was the monotonous pain of being perpetually secondary. The weeks preceding the nuptial ceremony passed in a confusion of employment and arrangement. I purchased a novel garment, a gentle azure that enhanced my complexion without being excessively attention-capturing. I organized time away from the bakery, considerably to my supervisor's disappointment, since June was our most active season. I should have recognized something was incorrect when Victoria did not request me to be an attendant. She had 5 attendants, I discovered from her social networking posts. Academic companions, employment companions, even our relative Jessica, whom she had scarcely communicated with in years. However, not myself. "The nuptial party is already established," she clarified when I ultimately developed the courage to inquire. "You comprehend, correct?" "These are individuals I observe regularly." I comprehended perfectly. I comprehended that I would never be portion of her intimate circle, that our mutual childhood signified nothing compared to her current social position. The nuptial ceremony was scheduled for a Saturday in late June at an exclusive resort outside Denver. I operated there alone, my garment hanging carefully in the rear seat, a diminutive gift wrapped in metallic paper on the passenger seat. I had dedicated weeks determining what to present them, ultimately settling on a collection of handcrafted ceramic vessels from a local craftsperson. Something thoughtful, something that demonstrated I cared. The resort was magnificent. maintained lawns extended toward mountain perspectives, and the ceremony location overlooked a pristine body of water. Ivory chairs were organized in flawless rows, and botanical specimens seemed to flourish from every accessible surface. Victoria had conserved no expenditure, which signified her maternal parent had conserved no expenditure. This was the nuptial ceremony she had always envisioned, the flawless culmination of her flawless offspring's flawless existence. I reached 2 hours premature, anticipating to locate Victoria and offer my assistance, or at minimum my support. Instead, I located disorder. The bridal quarters were occupied with laughing females in matching robes, champagne vessels in hand, while a photographer captured every instant. I knocked gently on the accessible door. Victoria observed up from her cosmetics chair, her eyes encountering mine for just a second before sliding away. "Elizabeth, you have arrived premature. I contemplated perhaps I could assist with something. Everything is under management. The nuptial coordinator has it all addressed. Why do not you go locate your seat? The ceremony commences soon." One of the attendants, a blonde female I did not identify, giggled and whispered something to the female next to her. They both observed me and smiled in that manner individuals do when they are being courteous, but genuinely wish you would depart. I retreated from the room, my face burning. I should not have arrived premature. I should not have presumed I would be welcomed in that inner sanctuary of prenuptial arrangements. The ceremony location was still being arranged when I made my way outside. Personnel members rushed around with final adjustments, perfecting what was already flawless. I wandered to the area where guest seating had been organized, searching for my designation card. Row after row of chairs extended before me, each row marked with diminutive numbered signs. The front rows were clearly reserved for immediate family and distinguished guests. I anticipated to locate my designation somewhere in the second or third row, proximate enough to demonstrate I mattered, distant enough to acknowledge I was not portion of Victoria's daily existence. I located my designation card in the back row, the ultimate row, partially concealed behind a decorative column that supported the ceremony structure. From that seat, I would have an obstructed perspective of the ceremony, unable to observe my sibling's face as she stated her vows. I stood there grasping that little card with my designation printed in refined script, and something inside me fractured. This was not an oversight. This was deliberate. This was Victoria's method of positioning me precisely where she thought I belonged. Out of sight, out of mind, scarcely acknowledged. I could have departed then. I could have operated back to Denver, contacted in unwell, and dedicated the day nursing my wounded pride with frozen dessert and inferior television. However, stubbornness kept my feet planted. I was her sibling, and I had been invited, and I would be condemned if I would present her the satisfaction of my absence. Guests began reaching around 4 in the afternoon. I observed from my position behind the column as individuals located their seats, greeted each other warmly, and took photographs against the picturesque backdrop. I identified some faces from family assemblies, aunts and uncles and relatives I had not observed in years. None of them noticed me tucked away in my corner. Our maternal parent reached 20 minutes before the ceremony, resplendent in a champagne-toned garment that probably cost more than my monthly residence payment. She was escorted to the front row by an attendant, beaming and accepting felicitations from everyone she passed. She did not observe back, did not scan the crowd for her younger offspring. Why would she? I was precisely where I was expected to be, invisible. The ceremony commenced at 5 precisely. Music increased from concealed speakers, and the nuptial party processed down the aisle. Each attendant appeared beautiful in their matching sage-toned garments, carrying bouquets of ivory roses and eucalyptus. The male attendants followed in sharp navy suits. Then came the ring carrier and botanical specimen girl, children I did not identify, probably from Gregory's family. Finally, Victoria appeared on our paternal parent's arm. Even from my obstructed perspective, I could observe she was magnificent. Her garment was a masterpiece of lace and silk, her veil trailing behind her like a cloud. Our paternal parent, whom I had scarcely communicated with since my parental unit's separation 5 years prior, appeared proud and distinguished in his formal attire. I stretched my neck around the column, attempting to capture a superior perspective. The angle was terrible. I could observe perhaps 40% of the actual ceremony, mostly just the backs of individuals' heads and occasional glimpses of the officiant. That is when I noticed I was not alone in the back row. A male sat 2 chairs away from me, partially concealed by the same column. He was younger than most of the guests, perhaps in his early 30s, wearing a perfectly tailored charcoal suit. His dark hair was styled casually, and he had the kind of sharp features that belonged in a magazine advertisement. However, what struck me most was the expression on his face. He appeared as out of place and uncomfortable as I experienced. He caught me observing and offered a diminutive, sympathetic smile. I smiled back weakly before returning my attention to the ceremony, or what I could observe of it. The officiant spoke about affection and commitment and partnership. Victoria and Gregory exchanged vows that I could not quite hear from my position. They exchanged rings, kissed to enthusiastic applause, and just like that, my sibling was married. The ceremony lasted perhaps 25 minutes, though it experienced both longer and shorter than that. As guests began standing and moving toward the cocktail hour location, the unfamiliar person from my row approached me. Approximate, he was even more striking with intelligent gray eyes that seemed to observe more than they should. That was quite a perspective, was it not? His voice carried a hint of amusement. Spectacular, I replied dryly. I especially enjoyed the back of that gentleman's head in row 8. Extremely photogenic. He laughed, a genuine sound that made something in my torso loosen slightly. I am Julian, and I am guessing from your prime seating assignment that you are either someone's least favorite relative or you insulted the nuptial coordinator. Elizabeth and I am the bride's sibling, actually. His eyebrows rose, surprise crossing his features. Her sibling? And they positioned you back here? Apparently. I am not portion of the nuptial aesthetic. Julian studied me for a moment, and I had the distinct impression he was observing far more than my bitter humor. Well, that is their loss. The cocktail hour is about to commence, and I have a sensation it is going to be just as awkward as the ceremony. What do you state we face it together? You do not have to pity me. I am acceptable. It is not pity. It is strategic alliance. I am here as a +1 for my business associate who could not attend, which signifies I know precisely 3 individuals at this nuptial ceremony, and 2 of them are the couple who just got married and will not remember I exist. So genuinely you would be doing me a favor. There was something genuine in his offer, something that made me want to state yes despite my wounded pride. Before I could respond, he extended his arm in an old-fashioned gesture. Shall we? I hesitated for only a moment before linking my arm through his together. We walked toward the cocktail hour, and for the initial time since reaching at this nuptial ceremony, I did not experience completely alone. The cocktail hour was held in a spacious pavilion overlooking the body of water. Circular tables were scattered throughout, each topped with more botanical specimens and candles. A bar dominated one wall, and servers circulated with trays of appetizers that appeared almost too beautiful to consume. Almost. As a confectionery artisan, I had strong feelings about food as art, and whoever had catered this event knew their craft. Julian stayed proximate as we navigated through the crowd. Individuals clustered in diminutive groups, exchanges buzzing with the pleasant energy that comes with free-flowing champagne and the happiness of a nuptial celebration. Several guests observed our way with curiosity, probably questioning who the handsome, unfamiliar person was and why he had attached himself to the bride's invisible sibling. We located a quiet table near the edge of the pavilion. Julian returned from the bar with 2 vessels of wine and a plate of appetizers he had somehow convinced a server to compile for us. So he stated, settling into the chair across from me. Inform me about your sibling. What is she like when she is not starring in the nuptial ceremony of the century? I took a sip of wine, considering how to respond. The truth experienced too raw, too revealing, however, something about Julian's steady gaze made me want to be honest. Victoria is flawless, or at minimum she has always labored very hard to appear flawless. Favorable grades, favorable career, favorable relationships. She is the offspring every parental unit dreams of having. And you are not. I am the offspring who became a confectionery artisan instead of a physician or attorney, who resides in a diminutive apartment instead of a residence with a mortgage, who dates occasionally instead of landing a pharmaceutical director with excellent prospects. I am the disappointment, the one who did not follow the script. Julian selected a crab cake from the plate and considered my words. Being a confectionery artisan sounds creative and challenging. Not everyone can master that craft. Try informing my maternal parent that. She still introduces me as Elizabeth, who labors with food like I am flipping burgers at a fast food chain. Family dynamics can be complicated. That is a diplomatic method of stating my family is dysfunctional. I grabbed a stuffed mushroom, suddenly ravenous. I had been too nervous to consume earlier. What about you? What do you do that landed you an invitation to this event? I labor in renewable energy consulting. My company assists businesses transition to sustainable practices. Boring technical material that makes individuals' eyes glaze over at parties. That does not sound boring at all. It sounds important. Appreciation. Most individuals just want to know if I can obtain them a deal on solar panels. He smiled. However, there was something guarded in his expression. I was expected to be here with my colleague Dominic. He is the one who actually knows the groom through some business connection. However, he came down with pneumonia last week, and I got volunteered. So, we are both nuptial crashers in our own method, survivors of inadequate seating arrangements at minimum. We conversed through the cocktail hour, and I found myself relaxing. Despite the circumstances, Julian was easy to converse with, asking questions that demonstrated genuine interest rather than courteous small conversation. He wanted to know about my favorite confections to create, about the challenges of laboring in a professional kitchen, about why I had chosen confectionery over other culinary paths. I inquired him about his labor, about the satisfaction of assisting companies reduce their environmental impact, about the frustrations of dealing with clients who wanted change, however were not willing to do the hard labor to achieve it. He spoke passionately about renewable energy, about creating systems that could sustain future generations, and I found myself captivated by his enthusiasm. "You genuinely believe in what you do?" I observed. "Is that so surprising? Most individuals at my sibling's nuptial ceremony seem more interested in appearing accomplished than actually being passionate about anything." Julian's expression shifted, something calculating entering his eyes. "You notice a lot for someone who was sitting behind a column. When you are invisible, you learn to observe individuals. It is amazing what you observe when no one knows you are observing." A server approached to announce that dinner was being served in the main ballroom. Guests began flowing toward the entrance, and Julian stood, offering his hand. "Ready to observe if your seating assignment for dinner is any superior?" It was not. The reception hall was gorgeous, decorated with what must have been thousands of dollars worth of botanical specimens and lighting. Extended tables were organized in a U-shape, with the head table elevated slightly on a platform, where Victoria and Gregory would sit with their nuptial party. Place cards directed guests to their assigned seats. I located my designation at a table in the distant corner position so that I would need to stretch my neck awkwardly to observe the head table. The chairs around me were empty, suggesting I had been positioned with the overflow guests, the individuals who had to be invited, however, did not quite fit anywhere else. Julian appeared at my elbow, his own place card in hand. "Interesting. I am at the opposite end of the room, almost like someone wanted to make certain the unimportant guests were spread out so we would not cluster and make the seating chart appear unbalanced. This is ridiculous." The words came out sharper than I intended, frustration finally breaking through my careful composure. "I am her sibling, her only sibling, and she is treating me like I am some distant acquaintance she experienced obligated to invite. You know what? Disregard the seating chart." Julian plucked my place card from the table and pocketed it along with his own. "Come on, what are you doing?" "Improvising. Just follow my guidance and act as though you are accompanying me." Before I could protest, he guided me toward a table considerably closer to the head table, one clearly designated for important guests. He pulled out a chair for me, his hand warm on my back as I sat, and then settled into the seat beside me with the confidence of someone who belonged precisely where he was. "Julian, we cannot just. We can, and we did. If anyone inquires, there was a confusion with the seating assignments, and we are fixing it ourselves. Trust me." The table filled quickly with guests who seemed to know each other well. They were Gregory's business associates, I gathered from their exchange, individuals from the pharmaceutical industry who spoke in acronyms and trade terms I did not comprehend. They greeted Julian with familiarity, calling him by designation, and he responded with easy confidence that suggested he knew precisely who they were. A female named Patricia, who introduced herself as the vice president of operations at Bennett Health Solutions, smiled warmly at me. "And you must be Julian's girlfriend. He has been keeping you a secret." I opened my mouth to correct her. However, Julian smoothly interjected. "Elizabeth prefers to stay out of the spotlight. She is not one for corporate events usually. However, she made an exception for this nuptial ceremony." "How sweet. And how do you know the bride and groom?" "Elizabeth is Victoria's sibling, actually." Patricia's eyebrows lifted in surprise. "Oh, I had no idea Victoria had a sibling." She never mentioned it during any of our assemblies about the nuptial arrangements. Her smile faltered slightly, as if realizing how that sounded. "I signify, I am certain it just never came up in exchange." "I am certain," I replied, keeping my voice neutral, even as the comment stung. My sibling had labored closely enough with Gregory's colleagues to plan aspects of this nuptial ceremony, and she had never once mentioned having a sibling. Dinner was served in courses, each plate more elaborate than the previous. Seared scallops gave method to a fresh salad, then a choice of beef tenderloin or herb-crusted salmon. The food was exceptional, however I scarcely tasted it. I was too aware of Julian beside me of the method he played his role as my companion with convincing ease. His hand occasionally touched my shoulder or back in diminutive gestures that appeared casual, however experienced, intentional. He incorporated me in exchanges, deferred to my opinions, made me experience visible in a method I had not experienced since reaching at this nuptial ceremony. Between courses, Gregory's paternal parent stood to present a speech. He conversed about his offspring's accomplishments, about how proud he was to welcome Victoria into their family, about the bright future ahead of the young couple. He mentioned how Victoria had transported joy and sophistication into Gregory's existence, how she was precisely the kind of female he had always anticipated his offspring would marry. My maternal parent stood next. Her speech was shorter, however no less effusive. She spoke about Victoria's childhood, about her offspring's determination and grace, about how she had always known Victoria would achieve great things. She conversed about the nuptial planning process, about maternal offspring shopping trips and cake tastings, and all the precious moments they had shared. She did not mention me once, not even in passing, not even to acknowledge that Victoria had a sibling. It was as if I had been edited out of the family history entirely. I experienced Julian's hand on mine under the table, his fingers intertwining with mine in a gesture of support. I squeezed back, grateful for the anchor. Then came the best male's speech, occupied with jokes about Gregory's bachelor days and heartfelt sentiments about locating true affection. The maid of honor followed with stories about Victoria's perfectionism and her romantic nature, about how she had always dreamed of a fairy tale nuptial ceremony. I waited for someone to mention me, to acknowledge my existence in even the most minimal method. However, speech after speech passed, and my designation never came up. I was the ghost at the feast, present however unseen. Dessert was served, an elaborate tiered creation of chocolate and raspberry that appeared impressive however lacked the depth of flavor it should have had. The ganache was excessively sweet, the cake strata excessively dry. As a professional I could not assist however critique it, and Julian noticed my expression. Not up to your standards. It is beautiful, however beauty is not everything, the execution is off. The chocolate is masking the raspberry instead of complementing it, and the texture is excessively dense. Could you do superior? In my sleep. The words came out more confident than I experienced, however they were true. I might be the family disappointment in every other area, however, in the kitchen I knew my worth. I believe you, Julian stated simply. After dessert, the reception transitioned into the dancing portion of the night. Victoria and Gregory took the floor for their initial dance, swirling together under flawless lighting while a live band played a romantic ballad. They appeared like something from a magazine, the flawless couple having their flawless moment. My paternal parent cut in for the paternal offspring dance, and I observed the two of them move together, remembering the times he had spun me around our living room when I was diminutive, before the separation, before everything fell apart. Did Victoria remember those times? Did she ever contemplate about the family we used to be? Julian stood and offered his hand. Dance with me. You do not have to keep playing the attentive companion. I am acceptable. I know I do not have to. I want to. Besides, I am a terrible dancer and I need someone to step on who will not sue me. I let him guide me onto the dance floor. He was not terrible at all. He was quite favorable, actually, leading with confidence while keeping a respectful distance. We swayed to the music and I found myself relaxing into the rhythm, into the moment. Appreciation, I stated quietly. For tonight, for sitting with me, for the whole false companion thing. You did not have to do any of this. Perhaps I wanted to. You are interesting, Elizabeth, more interesting than anyone else at this nuptial ceremony. You scarcely know me. I know enough. I know you are talented and underappreciated. I know you observe through the superficial nonsense that most individuals accept without question. I know you are hurt, however you are attempting not to demonstrate it, and that takes strength. His words hit something deep inside me, a place I had been protecting all night. My eyes burned with unshed tears and I blinked rapidly, refusing to cry at my siblings' nuptial ceremony. The song concluded and transitioned into something more upbeat. Other couples joined the dance floor, and Julian guided us to the edge away from the crowd. I need some air, I admitted. Let us go outside. We slipped out of the ballroom onto a terrace that overlooked the gardens. The night air was cool and welcome after the warmth of the crowded reception. Fairy lights twinkled in the trees, creating a magical atmosphere that experienced at odds with the turmoil inside me. I should not have come, I stated, leaning against the terrace railing. I knew it would be like this, however some portion of me anticipated it would be different. That perhaps Victoria would remember we are siblings. That perhaps she would want me here for genuine and not just to check a box on her obligation list. Julian stood beside me, his shoulder touching mine. Family can be the most complicated relationship we have. We are bound to them by blood. However, that does not guarantee affection or respect or even basic consideration. You sound like you are speaking from experience. My paternal parent and I have not communicated in 3 years. He had extremely specific plans for my existence, and when I chose a different path, he made it clear I was no longer the offspring he wanted. So, yes, I comprehend what it experiences like to be the disappointment. I turn to observe at him, observing novel strata in his expression. I am sorry. That must have been painful. It was, it is. However, I learned something important from it. The individuals who are expected to affection us unconditionally are still individuals with their own limitations and prejudices and failures. Sometimes the family we choose matters more than the family we are born into. Is that what tonight is, you choosing to be kind to an unfamiliar person? Perhaps it commenced that method. However, you are not an unfamiliar person anymore, Elizabeth. And this is not just kindness. There was something in his voice, something that made my heart beat faster. Before I could respond, the terrace doors opened and a group of guests spilled out, laughing and conversing. The moment broke and Julian stepped back slightly. We should probably go back inside. I contemplate they are about to cut the cake. The cake-cutting ceremony was everything I anticipated. More photographs, more speeches, more flawless moments carefully choreographed for maximum impact. Victoria fed Gregory a diminutive bite with delicate precision, and he returned the gesture with equal care. No smashed cake and faces, nothing undignified, flawless control, as always. As servers distributed slices of the nuptial cake, I noticed my maternal parent making her method through the crowd, stopping to converse with various guests. She was in her element, basking in the reflected glory of her offspring's accomplished nuptial ceremony. When her gaze finally landed on me, surprise flickered across her features, followed quickly by disapproval. She approached our table with measured steps, her smile tightening as she drew closer. Elizabeth, I did not anticipate to observe you sitting here. This table was reserved for Gregory's business associates. There was a seating confusion, Julian stated smoothly before I could respond. I am Julian, one of Gregory's renewable energy consultants. Elizabeth and I are here together. My maternal parent's gaze swept over Julian, taking in his expensive suit and confident demeanor. I could observe her recalculating, reassessing my presence based on the caliber of my companion. I observe. Well, it is delightful to encounter you, Julian. I am Eleanor, Victoria's maternal parent. She emphasized the words as if to remind me of my place in the hierarchy. I was not aware Elizabeth was observing anyone. We have been keeping things quiet, Julian replied, his hand locating mine on the table. Elizabeth is quite private about her personal existence. Yes, she is. Eleanor's smile did not reach her eyes. Elizabeth, dear, I anticipate you are enjoying the nuptial ceremony. Victoria labored so hard to make everything flawless. It is beautiful, I stated, forcing the words out. She must be extremely pleased. She is. Gregory is precisely the kind of male I always anticipated she would marry. Accomplished, established, from a favorable family. It is everything a maternal parent could want for her offspring. The unspoken comparison hung in the air between us. Unlike you, who labors in a bakery and resides alone and has nothing to demonstrate for your existence. Julian's grip on my hand tightened slightly, a silent demonstration of support. Elizabeth was just informing me about her labor as a confectionery artisan. It sounds incredibly demanding. Not everyone has the talent or discipline to succeed in that field. Eleanor's expression flickered with annoyance at having her implied criticism deflected. Yes, well, we all have our different paths. I should return to the other guests. Do attempt to enjoy yourself, Elizabeth. She swept away, leaving a trail of expensive perfume and maternal disappointment in her wake. That was unpleasant, Julian observed once she was out of earshot. That was my maternal parent on a favorable day. You should observe her when she is genuinely attempting to make a point. I am commencing to comprehend why you were sitting behind that column. The night wore on. The band played, individuals danced, drinks flowed freely. Victoria and Gregory made their rounds, thanking guests for coming and accepting felicitations. I observed them labor the room with practiced efficiency, noting how they dedicated more time with some guests than others, how they carefully maintained the hierarchy of importance. They reached our table eventually, Gregory leading with a politician's smile. Up proximate, I could observe he was handsome in a conventional method, with the kind of features that photographed well, however lacked character. His handshake was firm, however perfunctory, when Julian introduced himself. Then Victoria's eyes landed on me, and something complex passed across her face. Surprise, definitely. Discomfort, perhaps. She had probably forgotten I was even here, tucked away in my assigned corner where I could not interfere with her flawless day. Elizabeth, you appear delightful, she stated, her voice carrying that careful politeness individuals use with acquaintances they do not quite remember. Appreciation. The nuptial ceremony is beautiful, Victoria. Felicitations. I am so pleased you could attend. And I observe you have encountered some of Gregory's colleagues. Her gaze slid to Julian with curiosity. I do not believe we have been introduced. Julian, I labor with Gregory on sustainability initiatives for Bennett Health Solutions, and I have the pleasure of being Elizabeth's companion this night. Victoria's eyes widened slightly. This was clearly information to her. Oh, I did not realize you were observing anyone, Elizabeth. How wonderful. The method she stated it with, that slight emphasis on the word wonderful, suggested she found it more surprising than wonderful, as if she could not quite believe someone like Julian would be interested in someone like me. We have been dating for a few months, Julian continued, his arm sliding around my waist in a gesture that appeared natural and possessive. Elizabeth is remarkable. I count myself lucky she tolerates my workaholic tendencies. How pleasant, Victoria stated, though her smile had frozen slightly. Well, we should continue making our rounds. So many individuals to appreciate. However, let us catch up properly soon, Elizabeth. I experience like we have not genuinely conversed in ages. They moved on, and I released a breath I did not know I had been holding. That was surreal. She seemed surprised to observe you, appearing pleased. Victoria is not accustomed to me having anything she might consider valuable, incorporating a handsome companion who impresses her novel in-laws. So, you contemplate I am handsome? Julian's eyes danced with amusement. Do not let it go to your head. You are objectively attractive. It is not a personal observation. Naturally not. Purely objective. Around 10 in the night, the nuptial coordinator made an announcement that the bride and groom would be departing shortly. Guests were invited to line up outside with sparklers for the send-off. I debated skipping this portion, however, Julian convinced me to participate. You came this distant, might as well observe it through to the conclusion. We stood in line as sparklers were distributed, and when Victoria and Gregory emerged from the venue, we held our sparkling lights high along with everyone else. They ran through the corridor of light, laughing and waving, before climbing into a luxury vehicle that would transport them to their honeymoon quarters at the resort. As the vehicle pulled away, taillights disappearing into the darkness, I experienced a strange sense of finality. The nuptial ceremony was concluded. Victoria had obtained her flawless day, her flawless marriage, her flawless existence, and I had stood witness to it all from my position on the margins, precisely where she wanted me. Guests began dispersing, some heading to their rooms at the resort, others moving toward the parking area. Julian and I lingered on the steps, neither of us quite ready to acknowledge that the night was concluding. "Can I walk you to your vehicle?" he inquired. "I am actually staying at the resort tonight, room 314. I figured it would be easier than operating back to Denver this late." I hesitated, then added, "What about you?" "Same. Room 209. My colleague had already reserved the room before he obtained unwell, so it seemed wasteful not to use it." We walked slowly through the gardens, following the illuminated path back toward the main resort building. The night air had cooled further, and I shivered slightly in my thin garment. Julian immediately removed his suit jacket and draped it over my shoulders, a gesture so classic and unexpected that I almost laughed. "You do not have to do that. I am acceptable. Humor me. I was raised with old-fashioned manners, and my maternal parent would haunt me if I let you freeze." His jacket was warm and smelled like expensive cologne mixed with something uniquely him. I pulled it closer, grateful for both the warmth and the excuse to keep something of his with me a little longer. "Appreciation," I stated, "for everything tonight. You transformed what could have been a miserable night into something almost bearable." "Just bearable? I will have to labor on my false dating skills. Acceptable, superior than bearable, surprisingly pleasant in portions. That is more like it." He stopped walking, turning to face me. "Elizabeth, I know tonight commenced as a strategic alliance between two nuptial outcasts. However, I want you to know it became more than that for me. You are genuinely interesting, amusing, talented, and far too favorable for individuals who cannot observe your worth." His words wrapped around something fragile inside me, something I had been protecting for excessively extended. "Julian, I know we just encountered. I know this is strange timing. However, I would like to observe you again after tonight, after this nuptial ceremony in the genuine world where we are just two individuals without assigned seating charts and family drama." I wanted to state yes immediately. Every instinct informed me this male was different, that this connection was genuine despite the unusual circumstances. However, doubt crept in, the voice that sounded suspiciously like my maternal parent reminding me that males like Julian did not date females like me, that this was probably just kindness extended through one night and nothing more. "You do not have to state that just because you experienced sorry for me tonight. I am not. I am stating it because I dedicated the night with someone I genuinely enjoyed, and I want more nights like that. Because you make me laugh and contemplate and experience less alone in crowded rooms. Because when I observe at you, I observe someone worth knowing superior." He paused, vulnerability crossing his features. "However, if you are not interested, I comprehend. I do not want to push." "I am interested," I admitted, the words rushing out before I could second-guess them. I just do not want to obtain my anticipations up about something that might disappear in the dawn light. Then let us make certain it does not disappear. Have breakfast with me tomorrow. The resort has a decent restaurant and we can converse without formal attire and nuptial stress. What do you state? Breakfast sounds favorable. His smile was genuine and relieved. 9 o'clock. I will encounter you in the lobby. We had reached the entrance to the resort. The lobby beyond was quiet, most guests having already retired to their rooms. This was the moment where the night would officially conclude, where we would go our separate methods, and I would be alone with the weight of everything I had witnessed and endured. Julian seemed reluctant to depart too. He stood proximate, his hand still grasping mine, his eyes searching my face as if attempting to memorize it. Pleasant night, Elizabeth. I am pleased I crashed your sibling's nuptial ceremony. I am pleased you did too. Pleasant night, Julian. He leaned in slowly, providing me time to pull away if I wanted. I did not want. His lips encountered mine in a kiss that was gentle and questioning and somehow precisely right. It lasted only a moment before he pulled back, his thumb brushing my cheek. Then he was walking away toward the elevators, and I was standing alone in the lobby, wearing his jacket and touching my lips and questioning what precisely had just occurred. I made my method to my room in a daze. The space was pleasant, decorated in neutral tones with a perspective of the gardens. I hung Julian's jacket carefully in the closet, changed into my sleeping garments, and collapsed onto the bed. My telephone buzzed with a text from Victoria. Appreciation for coming tonight. It meant a lot to have your attendance there. I observed at the message for an extended moment. It meant a lot, genuinely. Was that why she had relegated me to the worst seat in the residence? Why she had never mentioned having a sibling? Why she had appeared surprised to locate me at a decent table during the reception? I typed and deleted several responses before settling on something non-committal. Felicitations again. The nuptial ceremony was beautiful. She responded immediately. We should definitely assemble when I am back from the honeymoon. I want to hear all about your novel boyfriend. He seems extremely accomplished. Naturally, that is what she had taken away from the night. Not that I had been there supporting her, not that we had scarcely communicated all night, however, that I had appeared up with an impressive companion. That was the only thing that made me visible to her. I did not respond. Instead, I set my telephone aside and observed at the ceiling, processing the emotional whiplash of the entire day. I had come to this nuptial ceremony, anticipating to experience like an outsider, and I had been proven correct in the worst methods. However, I had also encountered Julian, had those hours of experiencing seen and valued, and now I had breakfast to anticipate in the dawn. Sleep came slowly, my mind replaying moments from the night. Victoria's flawless smile, my maternal parents' dismissive comments, Julian's hand in mine, the sparklers illuminating up the darkness sky. Tomorrow I would go residence to Denver, back to my apartment and my employment and my regular existence. However, something had shifted tonight. Some fundamental comprehension about my place in my family and my own worth. I woke around 8 the next dawn to sunlight streaming through the curtains. For a moment I could not remember where I was. Then the previous day came flooding back, transporting with it a mixture of emotions I was not quite ready to face. I showered and dressed carefully in casual garments I had packed, attempting to appear effortlessly attractive without seeming like I was attempting excessively hard. The irony was not lost on me. After dedicating an entire nuptial ceremony being invisible, I was now concerned about making a favorable impression on the male I had just encountered. Julian was waiting in the lobby at 9 precisely, appearing refreshed in jeans and a navy sweater that made his grey eyes even more striking. He smiled when he observed me, a genuine expression that made my stomach flutter. Pleasant dawn. You appear beautiful. You appear pretty favorable yourself. Is that my line, though? Are not males expected to be the ones obtaining compliments on their appearance? I believe in equal opportunity compliments. Come on, I heard they make excellent waffles here. The restaurant was moderately occupied with other hotel guests. However, we located a quiet table by the window overlooking the body of water. Dawn light sparkled on the water, and the whole scene experienced peaceful, in a method the previous day's festivities had not. Over breakfast, we conversed more freely than we had at the nuptial ceremony. Julian informed me about his labor, about a particularly challenging project he was managing with a manufacturing company resistant to change. I informed him about the bakery, about my supervisor who was brilliant however temperamental, about the satisfaction of creating something beautiful and delicious that transported joy to individuals. You illuminate up when you converse about baking, Julian observed, cutting into his waffle. It is obvious you affection what you do. I do. It is the one area of my existence where I experience completely confident. No second guessing, no questioning if I am favorable enough. I know I am favorable at what I do. Then why do you let your family make you experience otherwise? The question was direct, almost confrontational, however his tone remained gentle. I set down my fork, considering how to respond. Because they are my family, because some portion of me still wants their approval, even though I know I will never obtain it. Not the method Victoria obtains it anyway. What if you stopped wanting their approval? What if you determined your opinion of yourself mattered more than theirs? Easier stated than done when you have dedicated your whole existence being compared to someone and coming up short. Julian reached across the table, his hand covering mine. For what it is worth, I contemplate you are extraordinary, and I do not state that lightly. We finished breakfast and walked outside, neither of us quite ready to part methods. The dawn was beautiful, the kind of June day that promised summer without the oppressive heat. Other guests were checking out, loading luggage into vehicles, heading back to their regular existences. I should probably obtain on the road soon, I stated reluctantly. I have labor tomorrow, and I need to prepare some things this afternoon. Before you go, can I inquire you something? Julian's expression turned serious. Previous night, observing how your family treated you, observing how they have made you experience diminutive and unimportant, it made me angry. Not just sympathetic, however genuinely angry on your behalf. That is kind of you. However, I am not finished. What if there was a method to change the narrative, to make them observe you differently, to present you back some of the power they have been taking from you all these years? I studied his face, attempting to comprehend where this was going. What do you signify? I signify, what if we continued this? Not false dating, however genuine dating. What if we dedicated time together, built something genuine, and along the method demonstrated your family that you are not the disappointment they have painted you as? Julian, I am not going to use you to make my family jealous. That is not fair to you. You would not be using me. I am offering, because I want to observe you again regardless. However, I also want to assist you if I can. Contemplate about it. Your sibling just married a pharmaceutical executive, correct? Well, I happen to be someone her novel husband's company needs. Someone who could make things extremely interesting for them. A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the dawn air. What are you stating precisely? Julian's expression shifted, becoming more calculating than I had observed before. I am stating that Gregory's company, Bennett Health Solutions, has been in conversations with my firm about a major sustainability overhaul. It is a multi-million-dollar project that would significantly improve their environmental impact and their public image. I am one of the lead consultants on the proposal, and you would use that as leverage somehow. Not leverage precisely, just an opportunity to remind them that individuals they overlook might be more important than they realize. Your family, especially Victoria, seems extremely invested in status and accomplishment. What if you suddenly had access to that world through me? What if they had to observe you differently? I should have stated no. I should have appreciated him for the thought, however clarified that revenge was not my style, that I was above such pettiness. However, standing there in the dawnlight, remembering every slight and dismissal from the night before, something darker whispered that perhaps I deserved a little vindication. This experience is manipulative, I stated slowly. Is it more manipulative than seating you behind a column at your own sibling's nuptial ceremony? Then never mentioning you have a sibling to colleagues she labored with on planning, then your maternal parent pretending you do not exist in her speeches. Julian's voice was passionate. Sometimes the individuals who hurt us need to be demonstrated consequences. Not cruelty, just consequences. What would this actually appear like? I am not going to sabotage anyone's business or career. I am not that individual. Nothing like that. I am conversing about visibility, about making certain you are present and acknowledged at future family events, about your sibling and maternal parent realizing that dismissing you signifies potentially damaging relationships that matter to Gregory's career, about you finally obtaining the respect you deserve even if it commences from a place of obligation rather than genuine affection. It was twisted logic and I knew it. However, it was also seductive. How many years had I dedicated being invisible? How many family assemblies had I endured being treated as lesser? The thought of Victoria being forced to acknowledge me, to incorporate me, to treat me like I mattered, it was intoxicating. I need to contemplate about this, I stated finally, naturally. Take all the time you need. However, Elizabeth, whether you agree to any of this or not, I meant what I stated about wanting to observe you again. That portion is genuine, no manipulation involved. We exchanged telephone numbers before parting. Julian kissed me farewell. Another gentle kiss that made my heart race, and then I was operating back to Denver with my thoughts in turmoil. The next week passed in a confusion of labor and confusion. Julian texted me daily, casual messages about his day that gradually built into longer exchanges. We conversed about everything and nothing, books we had read, places we wanted to travel, childhood memories that shaped us. He never pushed about his proposition, never transported up Victoria or revenge or any of it. He just conversed to me like I was someone worth knowing. On Friday, he contacted. I have a business dinner next Thursday in Denver. A potential client I am attempting to woo. Would you want to join me? Fair warning, it might be boring corporate conversation. However, I would affection your company. Are you certain? I do not know anything about renewable energy consulting. That is precisely why I want you there. You will keep me honest, keep the exchange from disappearing completely into jargon. Plus, the restaurant is expected to have an incredible confectionery artisan. I contemplated you might enjoy critiquing their confections. I laughed despite myself. You are bribing me with professional reconnaissance. Is it functioning? Yes. What is the dress code? Thursday reached faster than I anticipated. I departed labor premature to prepare, changing into a black garment that was refined without being flashy. Julian collected me at 7, appearing devastatingly handsome in a dark suit. The restaurant was exclusive, the kind of place where the menu does not list prices and the wine list requires a sommelier to navigate. Julian's client was already there, a middle-aged female named Patricia, whom I identified from Victoria's nuptial ceremony. She had been at our table, one of Gregory's colleagues from Bennett Health Solutions. Her eyes widened with recognition when she observed me. Elizabeth, what a delightful surprise. I did not realize you and Julian were still together. Still together and going strong, Julian stated smoothly, his hand warm on my back. Elizabeth has been patient with my crazy labor schedule. We sat and I attempted to fade into the background as Julian and Patricia discussed the sustainability project. However, Patricia kept pulling me into the exchange, inquiring about my labor, expressing genuine interest in the bakery where I labored. That sounds fascinating. I have such respect for individuals who labor with their hands, who create tangible things. My employment is all spreadsheets and conference contacts. Sometimes I miss making something genuine. The dinner progressed pleasantly, and when confection reached a deconstructed lemon tart with lavender cream, I could not assist offering my professional opinion. The components are technically excellent, however they are fighting each other rather than creating harmony. The lavender is excessively strong, overwhelming the lemon instead of complementing it. Patricia leaned forward with interest. Could you fix it? If you were making this, what would you change? I found myself clarifying the balance of flavors, the importance of letting each element shine without dominating. Julian observed me with something like pride, and Patricia listened intently, inquiring follow-up questions that demonstrated she was genuinely engaged. You know, we are planning a major corporate event in August, Patricia stated as coffee was served, a celebration for the accomplished completion of our sustainability project, assuming Julian's team delivers everything they have promised naturally. She smiled at him. We have not settled on a caterer yet. Would your bakery be interested in handling the confections? I blinked, caught off guard. We are a diminutive operation. I am not certain we would have the capacity for a large corporate event. Let me rephrase. Would you personally be interested in creating confections for the event? We could labor around your schedule, and I am authorized to offer extremely competitive compensation. Julian squeezed my hand under the table, a silent demonstration of support. Elizabeth's labor is exceptional. You would be lucky to have her. I would need to converse to my supervisor, make certain it would not conflict with bakery commitments. However, yes, I would be interested in discussing it further. Patricia smiled warmly. Excellent. I will have my assistant reach out to you next week with particulars. And Julian, excellent choice in girlfriend. She is delightful. After dinner, Julian operated me residence. I was quiet, processing what had just occurred. At my apartment building, he parked and turned to face me. That was quite a night, he stated. Did you plan that? The confection exchange, Patricia offering me that employment. I did not plan anything. I informed Patricia we were having dinner with her, and I mentioned you were a confectionery artisan. The rest was all her genuine interest and your talent speaking for itself. However, you knew she might offer me something. I anticipated she might observe what I observed, that you are incredibly skilled at what you do and deserve opportunities to showcase that talent. Is that so incorrect? I studied his face in the dim light from the street lamp. I cannot inform if you are genuinely attempting to assist me or if this is all portion of some elaborate revenge plot. Cannot it be both? I care about you, Elizabeth. That is genuine. However, I also contemplate the individuals who have dismissed you should be forced to reckon with your worth. Not through sabotage or cruelty, just through reality. Through them having to acknowledge your talent and value because it affects things they care about. This is complicated. The best things usually are. He reached over, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. For what it is worth, I am falling for you. That complicates things too, however, I'm not sorry about it. My breath caught. Julian, you do not have to state anything. I just wanted you to know where I stand. Now go inside before I do something impulsive like kiss you senseless in front of your building. I exited the vehicle, however, leaned back through the window. I am falling for you too, just so you know. His smile could have illuminated up the entire city. Favorable. That makes what comes next easier. What comes next? Patience. You will observe. The following week, Patricia's assistant contacted with particulars about the corporate event. It would be in mid-August, celebrating the completion of Bennett Health Solutions' transition to sustainable practices. They wanted an elaborate confection spread for 200 guests, and they were offering 3 times my usual rate. I discussed it with my supervisor, who was thrilled at the prospect of the exposure and the money. We labored out an arrangement where I would use the bakery kitchen during off hours, and the bakery would obtain credited as a partner while I would receive the bulk of the payment. Julian and I fell into a pattern over the next few weeks. Dinners, movies, extended exchanges that stretched late into the darkness. He was easy to be with, making me laugh and challenging me to contemplate differently about things. The physical attraction was undeniable. However, what surprised me was how considerably I enjoyed simply being around him. We did not converse considerably about Victoria or my family during those weeks. It was like we had created a bubble where that drama did not exist, where I could just be myself without the weight of family expectations. Then, 6 weeks after the nuptial ceremony, Victoria contacted. Elizabeth, hi, sorry I have not been in touch since the honeymoon. Things have been crazy with settling into married existence. No concerns. How was the trip? Incredible. The Maldives were everything we anticipated for. Listen, I wanted to observe if you were available for lunch this Saturday. I experience like we have not genuinely conversed in forever, and I want to catch up properly. I almost stated no out of habit. However, then I contemplated about Julian's words about visibility and respect. Certain, I can do lunch. Where did you have in mind? We encountered at an exclusive bistro near her novel residence, the kind of place where Victoria experienced comfortable. She appeared tanned and relaxed, the picture of newlywed bliss. We ordered salads and made small conversation about the honeymoon, about her novel neighborhood, about Gregory's labor. So, she stated finally, inform me about Julian. You two seemed quite proximate at the nuptial ceremony. However, you never mentioned you were observing anyone. It is relatively novel. We encountered a few months ago through labor connections. He seems extremely accomplished. Gregory's colleagues were all impressed by him. Apparently, his company is handling a massive project for Bennett Health. There it was, the genuine reason for this lunch, not sisterly bonding, however, fishing for information about someone who mattered to her husband's career. Julian is extremely favorable at what he does, I stated neutrally. I am just surprised you never mentioned him before. I signify I informed you all about Gregory when we commenced dating. Had she, though? I remembered stilted telephone contacts where she had mentioned having a boyfriend, however, provided few particulars. However, pointing that out would only create conflict, and I was curious to observe where this exchange was heading. I tend to keep my personal existence private. Well, I am pleased you are pleased. And I heard you are doing the confections for the Bennett Health event in August. That is wonderful. Gregory mentioned Patricia was extremely impressed with you. It is a favorable opportunity. Victoria stirred her salad absently. Listen, I wanted to apologize if things experienced strange at the nuptial ceremony. I know the seating arrangement was not ideal, and I experienced bad that we did not obtain considerable time to converse. The seating arrangement positioned me behind a column, Victoria. It was not just not ideal, it was humiliating. She had the grace to appear uncomfortable. That was the nuptial planner's mistake. She did not comprehend family dynamics, and by the time I observed the setup, it was excessively late to change things without causing chaos. You could have mentioned having a sibling to Gregory's colleagues. To anyone, however, you did not. That is not fair. Naturally, individuals know I have a sibling. Patricia did not. She was surprised at the nuptial ceremony when Julian mentioned it. She stated you had never transported it up during all your planning assemblies. Victoria's face flushed. I do not converse about my personal existence at labor. That does not signify I am hiding you, does not it though? When was the previous time you invited me to anything? When did you previous contact just to converse? Not because you needed something or had an obligation. Elizabeth, you are being dramatic. We are siblings. Naturally, we have a relationship. Do we? Because from where I am sitting, we have a biological connection and not considerably else. You treat me like an afterthought, like someone you have to incorporate out of duty, however would rather forget. Victoria set down her fork, her composure cracking slightly. Is that genuinely what you contemplate? That I do not care about you? I contemplate you care about me, the method you care about distant relatives, present at major events, however, not genuinely portion of your existence. And honestly, I have accepted that. What bothers me is the pretense. Do not invite me to lunch and act like we are proximate when we both know we are not. Fine. You want honesty? I will present you honesty. You made choices that embarrassed our maternal parent. You chose a career path that she could not brag about to her companions. You refused to conform to the expectations we grew up with, and yes, that created distance between us. I am sorry if that hurts your feelings. However, it is the truth. Her words confirmed what I had always suspected, however never heard spoken aloud. I was not the disappointment because I had failed. I was the disappointment because I had refused to compete on their terms. Appreciation for finally being honest, I stated quietly. However, here is some honesty back. I am not embarrassed by my choices. I affection what I do, and I am favorable at it. If that is not enough for you or maternal parent, that is your problem, not mine. And I am done apologizing for being myself. I stood, placing enough cash on the table to cover my meal. Appreciation for lunch, Victoria, and felicitations again on your marriage. I anticipate it transports you everything you are searching for. I departed before she could respond, my hands shaking as I walked to my vehicle. The exchange had been brutal, however necessary. Something inside me had shifted, some fundamental refusal to keep accepting crumbs of affection from individuals who observed me as lesser. Julian contacted that night. I informed him about the lunch, about Victoria's admission, about how I had finally stood up for myself. I am proud of you, he stated. That took courage. It experienced favorable, terrifying, however favorable. Like I finally stated things that needed stating. Are you ready for the next step? What next step? The Bennett Health event is in 3 weeks. I want you there as my companion, not just as the confectionery artisan. I want you visible and acknowledged and impossible to dismiss. Are you ready for that? I contemplated about Victoria's face during our lunch, about my maternal parents' dismissive comments at the nuptial ceremony, about all the years of being treated as less than. Yes, I am ready. The 3 weeks passed in a flurry of preparation. I labored obsessively on the confection menu, creating refined individual portions that would be both beautiful and delicious. Chocolate raspberry tarts with gold leaf, lemon panna cotta with edible botanical specimens, miniature opera cakes with flawless strata, honey lavender macarons that melted on the tongue. Each piece was a labor of art, proof of my skill and dedication. Julian assisted where he could, taste testing components and offering honest feedback. Our relationship had deepened during this time, moving from the exciting uncertainty of novel romance into something more solid. I was in affection with him, though I had not stated the words aloud. I suspected he experienced the same. The darkness of the event reached. It was being held at an refined event space downtown, all glass walls and modern architecture. I had dedicated the afternoon setting up the confection display, organizing each piece on tiered stands with strategic lighting to highlight the artistry. I changed into a magnificent emerald garment Julian had insisted on purchasing me, informing me I needed to appear as impressive as my confections. My hair was styled in gentle waves, my cosmetics flawless. When Julian observed me, his expression made the effort worthwhile. You are breathtaking, he stated simply. You clean up pretty well yourself. The event was already in full swing when we made our entrance. 200 guests mingled throughout the space, pharmaceutical executives and city officials and business leaders. I spotted Gregory and Victoria across the room, deep in exchange with a group of colleagues. My maternal parent was there too, appearing refined in champagne silk. Patricia spotted us immediately and rushed over. Elizabeth, the confections are magnificent. Everyone is already conversing about them. You have outdone yourself. Appreciation. I am pleased they meet expectations. Encounter them? You have exceeded them by miles. Come, I want to introduce you to some individuals. The next hour was surreal. Patricia pulled me from group to group, introducing me as the talented confectionery artisan responsible for the incredible confections. Individuals complimented my labor, inquired about my training, requested business cards. I was visible in a method I had never been at family events, acknowledged for my actual skills rather than dismissed for my choices. Julian stayed proximate, his presence both supportive and strategic. He made certain to mention our relationship to everyone we communicated with, positioning me not just as the artisan, however, as his partner. In this world that valued connections and status, being Julian's girlfriend carried weight. I observed Victoria notice us from across the room, observed her expression shift from confusion to recognition to something that appeared like discomfort. She stated something to Gregory, and they both observed our method. They have spotted us, Julian murmured in my ear. Ready for what? To remind them you exist. Before I could respond, Gregory was approaching with Victoria beside him. Approximate, he appeared strained, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. Julian, Elizabeth, favorable to observe you both. Elizabeth, I have heard nothing however praise for your confections. Extremely impressive labor, appreciation. I am pleased they have been well received. Victoria stood slightly behind Gregory, her expression carefully neutral. "Hi, Elizabeth. Everything appears beautiful. Appreciation, Victoria." An awkward silence stretched between us. Finally, Gregory broke it. "Julian, I was anticipating we could discuss the final phase of the sustainability project. There are some budget considerations we need to address, naturally." "Elizabeth, would you excuse me for a few minutes?" I nodded, and the two males moved away, leaving me alone with Victoria. The moment experienced heavy with unspoken words. "You have been occupied," Victoria stated finally, "landing major catering employments, dating important consultants. Quite a change from the previous time we conversed. I have always been occupied. You just never noticed. That is not fair, is not it? You dedicated years dismissing what I do as insignificant. Now that it is benefiting your husband's business connections, suddenly it matters." Victoria's carefully maintained composure cracked slightly. "What do you want from me, Elizabeth? An apology?" "Fine. I am sorry I did not appreciate your career choices. I am sorry the nuptial seating was bad. I am sorry we are not closer. Is that what you need to hear? I do not need anything from you anymore. That is what you do not comprehend. I am not the little sibling begging for scraps of approval. I have built an existence I am proud of with individuals who value me for who I actually am. Individuals like Julian, you signify? Gregory states he is extremely influential in his field, extremely useful to know. The implication stung even though I had anticipated it. You contemplate I am using him or that he is using me. That is the only method you can comprehend this, is not it? As a transaction, I am just stating it is convenient. You appear up at my nuptial ceremony alone and invisible, and now suddenly you are dating someone Gregory's company depends on and obtaining hired for major events. It is quite a transformation. Before I could respond, Julian returned with Gregory. Both males appeared tense, and I questioned what had been discussed in their brief exchange. "Victoria, we should mingle with the other guests," Gregory stated, his tone brooking no argument. "There are several board members here we need to communicate with." Victoria shot me one final unreadable observation before allowing Gregory to guide her away. I released a breath I did not know I had been holding. "That appeared intense," Julian observed. "Are you acceptable?" She contemplates I am using you to gain status or that you are using me to influence Gregory's business determinations. She cannot conceive of us just genuinely caring about each other. Does her opinion matter to you? I contemplated about it honestly, not as considerably as it would have a few months ago. I am done needing her approval. Favorable because you are about to obtain something superior than approval. What do you signify? Julian smiled, that calculating expression I had observed before. Observe. Patricia approached the microphone set up near the confection display. The room quieted as she began to communicate about the accomplished sustainability project, appreciating Julian's team for their excellent labor. Then she pivoted to discussing the event itself. "I also want to recognize someone who made tonight extra special. Elizabeth, could you join me up here?" My heart hammered as I made my method to the front. Patricia smiled warmly and continued, "Elizabeth created every single confection you have enjoyed tonight. Her artistry and skill transformed our celebration into something genuinely memorable. However, more than that, she represents precisely the kind of innovation and dedication we are attempting to foster at Bennett Health Solutions, which is why I am pleased to announce that we will be partnering with her for all of our major events going forward. Elizabeth, appreciation for your incredible labor." The room erupted in applause. I stood there stunned as Patricia handed me an envelope containing the contract we had apparently just entered into. My eyes located Julian in the crowd, observed his proud smile, and comprehended that he had orchestrated this moment perfectly. Then I located Victoria. She stood next to Gregory, clapping along with everyone else. However, her expression was complex, surprise certainly, discomfort, perhaps even a hint of respect she had never demonstrated before. My maternal parents stood beside them, appearing equally shocked. For the initial time in my existence, I was the center of attention in a room that incorporated my family, and it was because of my own merit, my own skills, my own worth. Not because I had married well or achieved conventional accomplishment, however, because I had excelled at something I loved. The applause faded, and I returned to Julian's side. He pulled me proximate, kissing my temple. "How does it experience?" he whispered, like vindication. "Like finally being observed. You were always worth observing. They were just excessively blind to notice. The night continued, however, everything had shifted. Individuals sought me out specifically now, not as Julian's girlfriend or Victoria's sibling, however as Elizabeth, the talented confectionery artisan with a bright future. My maternal parent approached eventually, her smile tight, however present. "Felicitations, dear. That was quite an announcement." Appreciation, maternal parent. I suppose your career choice has labored out after all. It was not an apology, was not an acknowledgement of years of dismissal. However, it was something, a grudging recognition that perhaps I had known what I was doing all along. In the months that followed, everything changed. The Bennett Health Partnership led to other opportunities, other high-profile events that showcased my labor. Julian and I moved in together, our relationship deepening into something permanent and genuine. We conversed about the future, about marriage and children, and building an existence that honored both our ambitions. Victoria and I reached a cautious détente. We were not proximate, probably never would be, however there was mutual respect now. She had learned that dismissing me came with consequences, that I had value beyond her narrow definition of accomplishment. Our interactions remained formal, however cordial. Family assemblies no longer the painful exercises in invisibility they had once been. My maternal parents struggled more with the adjustment. She had built her identity around Victoria's achievements, and having to acknowledge mine upset her carefully maintained hierarchy. However, even she could not ignore the reality of my accomplishment, the respect I had earned in my field, the existence I had built on my own terms. As for Victoria and Gregory, the consequences of her treatment of me became increasingly apparent over time. Gregory's reliance on Julian's company for sustainability consulting signified that Victoria could never fully dismiss me without potentially damaging her husband's professional relationships. She had backed herself into a corner of forced civility, having to incorporate me in family events and acknowledge my presence because doing otherwise might reflect poorly on Gregory. The pharmaceutical industry was smaller than individuals realized, and word traveled fast about how executives' families conducted themselves. Victoria, who had always been so careful about maintaining the flawless image, now had to ensure that image incorporated being a supportive sibling. The irony was not lost on me. She had dedicated years making me invisible, and now she was trapped in a situation where she had to make me visible, had to sing my praises to her husband's colleagues, had to pretend we had always been proximate. Every family assembly became a performance where she could not afford to slip, could not afford to demonstrate the disdain she had once displayed so freely. Her flawless existence now required my presence, and that requirement would follow her for as extended as Gregory's career depended on maintaining favorable relationships with Julian's firm. She had constructed her own cage, one where she would forever be reminded that the sibling she had dismissed had become someone she could not afford to ignore. Observing back on that nuptial ceremony day, on sitting behind that column, experiencing invisible and worthless, I could hardly recognize the individual I had been. Julian had offered me more than false dating protection at a difficult event. He had offered me a mirror that reflected my genuine worth, a partnership that elevated rather than diminished, and the tools to demand the respect I had always deserved. The revenge, if that is what it was, had not been about cruelty or destruction. It had been about finally, definitively proving that I mattered, not because of whom I married or how I compared to my sibling, however, because of who I was and what I could do. And as I stood in the kitchen of the bakery, I now co-owned creating art from flour and sugar and skill. I realized that the best revenge had been becoming precisely who I was meant to be and making them all observe while I did it.